I'm Mustafa Özbilgin from Brunel, University of London. I'm one of the co-authors for this project, and I will be chairing the second half. Please.
No. Okay. Now, I'm in the bad books here already because I did no slides. Okay. And I'm going to explain why I did no slides. I have systemic lupus erythemus, which is an autoimmune disease, which I got when I was 13 years of age. And it took over 40 odd years for them to diagnose, 30 odd years for them to diagnose when I got very ill when I was in Queen's University, Belfast, and I keeled over. And I went from 10.5 stone to about 7 stone in the space of a few weeks. And they pumped me full of, because my heart was in a bad way, of steroids. And in a university, actually, there's very poor communication. So when I was I worked for PJ Hegarty's. So PJ Hegarty's would be the competition to BAM. Yeah. So they'd be the 3 big construction companies in the UK would be Sussex, where my father worked, PJ Hegarty's, where I worked, and BAM would be the competition. Okay? So that's why I'm laughing. We're all friends. We all love each other. And I suppose what it is, you know, I came out of the acute medical unit on a Friday evening after getting discharged, got into my car, drove 4.5 hours up the motorway and went in teaching on a Monday morning because the guy who was doing the teaching timetable was a black Presbyterian, is what they'd say in Northern Ireland. He didn't particularly like my accent, and I had 2 young children, and he had me teaching on a Monday morning and on a Friday afternoon. Okay, so that tells you everything you need to know where I started. Okay, so in terms of working class, I said both my parents, they left school at 13 years of age. My father was a Cooper carpenter, okay, 7th generation Cooper. They worked in the whiskey business. And my mum was a tailor, a lady tailor, okay. My mum actually, her writing skills weren't great, but my father was very, very bright. And when he was 13, my grandmother used to say to us when we were older, you know, when your dad left school, he was the eldest. My grandmother had about 13 children, 7 of them survived. The priest came down from the local school and said, you must leave Joe stay on. You must leave Joe stay on in school. He's a very clever boy. But that's not the way things were done. Okay, so my parents worked round the clock on Saturdays and Sundays, and they made lots of money, but I never saw them. My father would get up at 6:30 in the morning, he'd go away to work, and he'd come back in an evening, and he had a drink problem. So drink is a big thing with Irish people, and I know you laugh, but actually it goes back to the famine. Okay, so it's actually a genetic thing. It's a genetic mutation. So there's 2 things that happen with Irish people as a result of the famine. And that was Irish people have a lot of mental health issues related to bipolar issues. Okay, so that's the first thing. And that relates to the famine, because obviously if you have a huge population that's wiped out and then you have young children who immigrate or leave, are left alone in the country, their sort of psyche is very, very different. To put it in sort of the concept for people, or to contextualise it, it's like being on a boat and you've no food, and what happens is you get scurvy and a whole load of other things, and you actually go a bit bonkers, and that's what actually happened to Irish people. So that association and that name, the Fighting Irish, with Irish people who went to Boston and places like that, it's actually sort of prerogative. Okay, so there's a load of terminology and phrases that are used in the English language that people actually don't realise are quite prerogative to Irish people. So you'd hear it on the BBC News, you'd hear somebody say, beyond the pale. Okay, so that means that everybody outside of Dublin is a savage. So when people use that phrase, they actually don't know it's actually very discriminatory to an Irish person. Okay, so there's a whole load of things like that happen with Irish culture, and that's why Irish sort of make a joke or a laugh, and actually we sort of play into the caricature of it. So when Irish people came to the UK, my family came to the UK, World War I, World War II, they fought in the wars, the Boer War, all those wars, they've been all over the world. They were in the British Army and the Royal Navy. And I suppose my grandfather, he was in London here during the war, okay, and he got a British pension. My grandmother got a British pension. My parents would have been entitled to British passports because they were pre-partition. So this gentleman here said to me, he says, I'm thinking, I'm entitled to an Irish passport. Okay, so when I arrived in Manchester, everybody started telling me about they were applying for Irish passports. So to contextualise that, the population on the island of Ireland is about 7 million. And we could probably more than 10 times our population by just having people apply for passports over the last 2 generations. Okay? So in terms of myself, and I'll contextualise it, when I was in school, in primary school in Ireland, we were all segregated in our tables in the classroom according to your background. So if you were professional kids, children, you were on one table. If you were people who left school earlier age, you were on another table. And that predetermined your sort of direction in life. So social mobility in Ireland, like the UK, is actually very, very difficult for ordinary people from ordinary backgrounds. And what I've noticed, okay, as I went through life, people as they go socially mobile, in the academic world particularly, their accents change and they lose their working class accents. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's very hard to maintain a working class background, voice or accent in academia. Okay, in terms of, you know, me then moving from primary school, so they sent me to the slow teacher. So they needed to employ a teacher for people who had, like, they couldn't, like dyslexia or whatever, I wasn't even diagnosed. You know, oh, we'll send her to the slow teacher. So you go out to the slow teacher and you'll be beaten up by the slow teacher, okay? Because obviously she was happy in her job, okay? And you would be victimised and you might get your head banged off the radiator, and that was the normality of the primary school that I had. But my parents worked very, very hard, and my mother decided she was going to give us an opportunity and pay for us to go to a private fee-paying school in Cork. So I'm from a working class background, I'm in a private fee-paying school. And back in those days, the fees were about £2,000, which was half of what it would cost to go to the university in Ireland, because fees in Ireland to go to university were £4,000. Okay, so this is back in the 80s. And I know. Yeah, I actually know. Okay, so in relation to that, it's very hard to juggle all of that social mobility. So when you go to secondary school, then I was discriminated against by the working class, the professional people in the school I was in. So they had opportunities, I didn't have opportunities. They were going on funny holidays and doing different things that I never experienced. Okay, so then when I went to university, okay, I had my health issues, I'm dealing with people. I was always an outsider looking in. I've never been anything but an outsider looking in. So coming to things like this, I get very anxious. Okay? For the full weeks before this and the build up to it, I'm actually quite nervous and I'm very anxious. I don't like meeting new people anymore. Okay? I sort of stick to my own little tribe, which is basically my little family unit. And I engage with people here, and it's all quite overwhelming. So I was editor-in-chief of Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews. And first of all is my name, so they don't know whether I'm a man or a woman. And a lot of people, they wouldn't even check it up. So when I was in industry, the first thing they tell you when you're in industry, will you make sure whether it's a man or a woman? Okay? Make sure, how do I address that person in an email? So over COVID, it's actually even become worse. You get emails from people now, students, people across all walks of life and everybody, and they just have down in the email, hi. So as a working class person, that wouldn't sit well with me at all. But it's quite the norm now. Hi, no sort of anything to do with anybody. It's quite unprofessional. And nobody is training anybody up now how to be an actual human being. So we're going around ticking boxes about EDI. We're going around ticking boxes about how we support people, how we're meant to support people. But actually, do we really support people if we can't have an honest conversation? So they're the things that I struggle with. The fact when I moved to Northern Ireland, they just assumed when I was another academic cupping, I was coming from the Republic of Ireland, I knew how to get a bank account in the UK. Didn't have a clue. I knew how to get a national insurance number. I was explaining that last night, and another lady said to me, well, I got no help. And actually what I discovered is because she wasn't an academic. She was an administrator. And it was only by the conversation I discovered that. So all of these things play into the discrimination. The people who always most welcomed me actually were gay men. Because they understood, they obviously have so much going on in the way they treat, the way they're treated, the way they have to hold back on things. It's so difficult for them. And they were so kind to me. The reason why I left being working in industry and infrastructure, because I worked in infrastructure, was because basically I couldn't do the travel anymore because I was the carer for my parents. So my mother had multiple myeloma, my father had bowel cancer, and then he lost his sight. He was blind at the end, clinically blind. And over the last 10 or 12 years, that's what I was doing. I was minding my parents, holding down a job, and I went from lecturer to reader. When I went in to apply for senior lecturer, the guy, he's an Australian now, he was an academic. He'd moved from Imperial to Australia, back to Queen's University, Belfast. Then he's gone back to Australia again. He said to me, when I went into him, he said, who were you and what metrics would you have? And he was meant to be my head of school. Can you imagine? Isn't that shocking? okay? Because he actually had never looked up what my metrics were, what boxes I ticked, what I had done or what I didn't know. He didn't even know who his own staff were. Obviously, that said it to me. And I said, that's no problem. I just walked away. I went out the door. I said, you know what? I'm not going to apply for a senior lecturer. I'm going to wait a year. I'm going to tick a few more boxes, because that's what they love, box ticking. And I'm going to apply for reader. And that's exactly what I did. Okay, is that all right? So I'm going to say to everybody, if you want to play the academic game and do it clever, you just rock up and tick all the boxes, and that's what a lot of people do. Whether it's successful or meaningful in the end, or beneficial for society, or sustainability, or for our well-being in at large as a community, that's what we need to ask ourselves. And they're the sort of questions that I ask myself as an academic. And I hope when I teach my students, and I hope when I train my PDRAs, that I encourage them to think laterally about the career moves they make and the decisions about how they engage with everybody. Okay? So we're actually very blessed that we get taxpayers' money to educate society and for it to grow. And we have to take that in. It's not just a game. It's an honour to be an academic. Okay? Thanks.
Shall we say?
Yeah, so the next.
Yeah, the next speaker. We have two speakers for the finalized project. Thank you so much. Oh, yes. I'm trained jumper. This part we have two projects with presentations of the findings. First, I would like to welcome Dr. Vanda Papafilippou to present her work.
Thank you.
After 10 minutes, can we have the next presenter and both
Yes.
of you? We will take some questions.
Okay. Hello, I'm Vanda. I'm a senior lecturer in Human Resources Management at UWI Bristol. So this was the team we had this project with. So Dr. Anna Hadji-Michali from Bath and Miss Lucy Downs from UWI. So very briefly, so these were our initial aims and objectives. You know, people from Ignite know the adventures we had with this project. So I've put in bold what we ended up doing. So it was to explore the barriers and enablers that neurodivergent energy researchers face in progressing their careers. We also wanted to explore the views of line managers, neurotypical and neurodivergent, and our views of HR professionals. HR professionals didn't reply to our emails. Very inclusive behaviors. Very proud of the sector. And line managers were trickier to get hold of. Again, very inclusive practices here. So the plan A, as I said, we had huge support from Ignite, Ofgem, Tide, engineering. You know, I haven't had so much support in my research life. But many academics did not even reply to our emails, which is indicative. Okay, so I emailed colleagues from, like, you know, chairing research centers and so on. I don't know if it was because of the project, because I'm Greek, because I'm from UWI, but I was not worthy of the reply. We wanted to do focus groups, very tricky because people did not disclose to anyone. We ended up doing semi-structured interviews. This is what we managed to get hold of. Neurodivergent researchers, most with ADHD. We had only 2 autistic participants, and the rest were basically dyslexic and ADHD. 4 neurodivergent line managers, 1 at C-suite level, 1 neurotypical line manager, and 3 HR professionals from the same organization. Okay, so very briefly, in terms of PhD students, okay, so what was very crucial was their supervisors. No surprise there, but this was particularly important for them. So all actually the students with ADHD were diagnosed during their PhDs. This was not picked up before. And this was due to the difficulties they had to manage their projects, and because one of the supervisory team happened to have ADHD as well. Now, those with positive experiences happen to have neurodivergent supervisors with the same condition who could understand and support them. Those with very negative experiences, and there were a few, had supervisors who did not understand their interdisciplinary way of approaching energy research. And I wanted to highlight this because all of them had very different approaches to energy problems. Okay, so they all saw the problem more holistically. They started from a sector, but then they expanded. Nobody could get it, and they were, forced to try to narrow down. In terms of ECRs, just put the blame on neoliberalism. So this was the conclusion of my PhD. This is the conclusion of this project. So there was this huge pressure to publish in order to get a more permanent contract. They struggled to meet multiple deadlines. The supervisors put a lot of pressure on them to publish because they wanted to publish with them and do their PhDs and all that, and they were struggling. But thanks to their creativity, and I will stress that again, they were successful in securing funding. So obviously they went from one precarious contract to another, but they managed to secure their own, the money to move on. All academics now, like at all levels, we had professors, few, but we had. So there is a huge stigma within academia, like it's a horrible environment. A participant said that most academics are sociopaths. I don't know if you identify. They are, and they're like, I admit I've got many issues myself. But students are genuinely scared of me, I kick them out of the class, so there is something there. So there was one participant actually went twice to check if anyone was overhearing outside the office. Okay, so yeah. Many of them, or most, haven't disclosed because there are a lot of discussions behind closed doors. So colleagues talked in a negative way about neurodivergent students, and then once they heard that, they said, I just keep it for myself. Lack of support, that I love this quote about sociopaths. And although they said there are quite good, reasonable adjustments in place for students, there aren't that many for academics. And they found ways, though, to work around it, but, not perhaps and they didn't even know what they might need. Different ways of working, similar with the PhD students. Colleagues didn't really get what they were doing. There were instances of harassment. A lady was crying during the interview, and I had to stop it because she was bullied by her line manager. As a UCU rep, I told her, go and file a grievance now. But that's a thing. But again, the thing is that there were instances of great creativity, and they secured funding, okay? The thing here is that they struggle to publish, but they get funding. So this is the thing. In the industry, things might be slightly better because there are more established HR structures in place. And neurodiversity has started, it's discussed a bit more openly than in the past, okay? So at the university, we don't acknowledge it. In the industry, it's a bit better. And the industry seems to be more accepting of different ways of working as long as there are results. Okay, so if the shareholders are happy, we are happy, like fair and square. So at least you know what you are up to. So what are the implications for practice? So for research, like PhD researchers, I think it's really, really important to consider the supervisory teams. Okay, so it's very important to have a more interdisciplinary team, and also I think to include academic support throughout. Okay, so academics are not experts in pedagogy. We all work in our own way. Personally, I think my own way is the best, okay, and I can prove it, so, but I can't really impose it on anyone else. So we need support. Also raise awareness around neurodiversity and encourage actually and support different ways of working. There is a lot of scope of adopting and promoting learning technologies. For example, in the organization, we did the interviews with 3 HR professionals. They had all the software available to anyone, and they didn't have to justify why they need it or not. So it was easily accessible. Anything you need, you could just access it and problem sorted. And meaningful support with publications. Not just metrics, you have to publish 3 papers by the end of the year, otherwise I will fire you. Just give them some more support about how to do so. In terms of VCRs, again, mentoring, okay, so help them to identify funding opportunities and support with the admin part of things, potentially, and more support again about writing and publishing. But remember that one size doesn't fit all, so try to consider, within the writing team, who's doing what. And for higher education in general, I would say the main thing is, can we consider different ways of publishing and disseminating research? It is hard. I get it. I hopefully, I'm applying for promotion in September. I know I'm stressing about my publications, but I've done a lot for dissemination. But this cannot be captured anywhere, for example. Many other people are in the same position. So how can we make this part of our practice, okay? And support and acknowledge it. And also in terms of training, etc. Thank you.
The second presentation is by Dr. Stewart, Beattie. Yeah, please.
Hello, everyone. My name's Stewart Beattie. I am the Associate Dean for Culture and Inclusion in the Faculty of Engineering. Most of the work that I'm going to talk about today is in my other job as the Apprenticeship Programme Lead, a job that's being squeezed and squeezed more and more by this title. The apprenticeships were set up as an alternative route to get a degree and to be fully qualified in the same amount of time as people that go to full-time education. They were set up with the idea of your fees would be paid for, there's no student loans, you'd be working and being paid, and you'd be gaining experience at the same time. So it would all work together and it would result in lots of social mobility. The reverse is true. There's been a middle-class grab, and when we get all our applications in for the programmes, we just see the same people. And actually, a lot of people who've applied for the full-time apply for the graduate apprenticeship as well. Retention is a bit of an issue for the graduate apprenticeship. I think we're starting to see that improve a little bit as we get further away from COVID. So the ones that will be sitting their final exams this year, I think didn't sit highers. I think that's right. So a lot of them have dropped out of the system because they didn't practice exams in the same way as everyone else. And a big part of what we thought initially was, well, employers have new powers over who joins the degree programmes because the employers employ, and then they send us the candidates, And we advise and we help about what are the right candidates and how that works. But it's not a straight application process. So there's lots of existing resources out there about how you recruit in an inclusive way. And we know these things are out there, but we don't necessarily know exactly what they are. So this is something directly from the people who used to fund the apprenticeships, and they're still involved in some way, but for complicated political reasons, they've kind of been moved to the side. And there's also other bodies that are much more focused on inclusivity. This is just one example on the slide here. So there is information out there, and we do know how to recruit. We do know how to try and make inclusive recruitment practices. But we decided to speak to employers in the first method, and I've presented some of this work already, so I won't spend too long on it. But we were basically asking, what do you do, and how do you recruit? And we have companies involved in the programme that have tens of thousands of employees. We also have 5 people in an office in Kilmarnock who are a design consultancy. So they have a very different way of recruiting. So the big employers tend to do all the things that are as best practice for recruitment. The smaller employers tends to be one engineer who is given the task of go and find an apprentice. There's a different way of working the recruitment process for them. So our initial findings were the reasons were to try and have new recruits, new talent in the system. So there is scope to create a population that is representative and diverse. But a lot of the decision-making and the advertising was kind of informal word of mouth. Decision-making was done on gut feeling, one person doing the interviews and one person making the decision. And we've known for a long time, before we ever thought about apprenticeships, that those things result in exclusive recruitment. But it's still happening. People also spoke about organisational culture. Well, it depends what that culture is, whether or not that's inclusive or not, to the decision to recruit someone. So there's good and bad, and we've liaised with employers a few times to see what we could do to help with that. And the next stage was to talk to the students themselves. So this is the new work that hasn't been presented yet. So we surveyed, apologies for the amount of text, that looks horrendous. We surveyed 121 civil engineering students at Strathclyde, so the people that knew about civil engineering and came to our programme. They've probably been through open days and all the rest of it, so they know a bit about civil engineering. And we surveyed 35 new graduate apprenticeship students who joined the programme, and we asked them general questions about how did you seek advice from, what brought you to this degree, and have you heard of a graduate apprenticeship? Can you describe a graduate apprenticeship in one sentence? And then we asked some very basic questions about who they were and who they identified as. So 79% of the full-time students had heard of a graduate apprenticeship. So that means 21% of them who were coming to do civil engineering in the full-time had never heard about a graduate apprenticeship. Of that 79%, a third of them described it completely incorrectly, and less than half described it correctly. So we had to code that a little bit, because some of them put in things that were in between right and wrong for what a graduate apprenticeship is, so we had to be a bit kind on that. We have low numbers of women and people of colour, so the data on that isn't great for making meaningful interpretations of what we've done, and intersectionality is impossible to look at, but I'll come back to that. But for the full-time traditional civil engineering students, 41% of them knew what a graduate apprenticeship was, and 76% of those people had their advice from school. That's different from when we surveyed just the new graduate apprenticeship students. 72% of them had asked family, and only 20% of them cited school as a source of the information. They also said they came for things like income, career. It's not working in a bar and studying, it's learning and getting work experience and that kind of thing. Half of them this year were already in employment, so there's an upskilling factor to that, which is good to see, but it's difficult to then have any kind of influence on who comes forward for the programme for us. But I think it's really interesting that only 20% of the people that knew about a GA and came to a GA had actually sought advice from the school or identified the school as a place where they got good advice. I've kind of talked through that slide, so I'll skip on to this bit. We also carried out some focus groups, and yes, we did focus groups of the GA students, sorry. There were a few that came forward, so we only managed to have 2 groups that were exclusively female. One mixed ethnicity group, which I'm not sure is the right terminology for it, and one entirely male group who were all identified as white male. And we asked them questions about why did you apply, how do you identify, and various things about protected characteristics, and do they see any challenges with those protected characteristics in their chosen path of study and work. The findings really are that there's an interaction of lots of things causing a lack of diversity. You need a significant other to explain the system to you. So if you have a professional family member who can understand university, who can understand industry, then they can explain maybe what a graduate apprenticeship is. They can explain the advantages, the benefits of doing that. But if you don't have that support at home, you're relying on the school to tell you about it. And the information in schools is really patchy. It depends on who the careers advisor is, and it depends on the local authority. So across Scotland, it's divided in lots of different ways about what advice you actually get. The good thing is that through the focus groups, we did find some evidence of positive STEM activities, particularly in the female focus groups. So that's been going on for quite a few years, and we're now seeing people come through the system that have come into contact with those activities from quite a young age. So it's good that that's happening and people are being encouraged at school. It's not quite resulting in an exact split of 50-50, but there are other problems that are causing that. One of the things that came up from a number of the respondents was that the word apprenticeship tends to signify someone who perhaps isn't as good at school. So if you're good at school, you stay in school and you go to university. Well, the fact it's called a graduate apprenticeship, well, they're not graduates, first of all, and it is an apprenticeship in a way, but it's not an apprenticeship on the tools if you leave school early and you just want a practical job. And I think that's a big misunderstanding about what in the system about what's happening for degrees that are related to an apprenticeship. And it tends to be boys who are identified within the system, within the school system, early as you would be good for an apprenticeship. You don't like school, you don't like being here, so you would be good for an apprenticeship. And that's not what we're looking at. Some of the interesting findings from the survey and focus groups, there is a positive aspect to this which we'll cover. So some of the still the same problems that we've known about for such a long time in construction for females. So PPE doesn't fit, it's not designed for women. Toilets, changing rooms, facilities on site in various different ways are often not suitable. But you do see some examples of best practice out there, but it's something that the students themselves have raised as a bit of an issue. So in one way, that's terrible, they're seeing that as an issue, but in the other way, they know to raise it as an issue now. So there is an understanding that that shouldn't happen, and they know it shouldn't happen, which I think is kind of a positive point. It's a weak positive point, but it's something that as a result of work that people have done for a long time. From the male focus group, which was really interesting, they raised that male banter is still a thing. So when there's no females around, the chat amongst the guys goes back to something that we really wouldn't like to hear about at a conference like this. The female groups weren't aware of that. Again, the weak positivity is that those guys knew to raise that. They knew it was a problem. They recognised it wasn't right when they were in the workplace. I don't think they addressed it. I don't think they confronted it. But these are, 18-year-old guys on sites with people with... Everybody has 30 years' experience when you work on site. It doesn't matter how old they are. They've all been working on site for 30 years. So there's an intimidation thing there about confronting something you see is not right. But again, they were aware it wasn't right. But the female participants were not aware it was happening, which I think is interesting. Another interesting point for universities to consider is that caring responsibilities generally were seen as better catered for at work rather than university. And for those of us who are involved in not just teaching, but the returning of marks and exam boards and the decisions made around personal circumstances and that kind of thing, it's brutal. There are rules to make it fair, but there's inevitably going to be people that are really disadvantaged by the rules that are made. And it's very, very difficult to keep those two things separate and try and make sure everyone gets a fair shot, but that there are rules that are fair. And I do have a bit of sympathy for faculty colleagues that have to set these rules, but there is something that we need to do here to make it better for people who come up against whatever circumstances that are affecting their studies. And another thing that I think is maybe for universities to work on, and employers too, is that the apprentices felt that employers generally were less aware of what was needed for the degree in terms of skills. Now, I think that is very dependent on employers, because some employers are very good. Thank you, I've gone over time. I actually set up a 10-minute timer and I didn't press go, so that's useful. So there's a whole question here about what should we do. I think improved understanding within the school sector would be great. Is the word apprenticeship wrong? Should we be calling them that? Improve understanding generally of what a university degree is, but that probably goes back to the school advice. We need data on intersectionality, and there is a project set up that is ready, but for staffing issues hasn't gone ahead, and you're looking at the staffing issue. And that includes multiple universities looking at some of the same things. And there's other kind of projects tied to that should help us as well. And that other project is we're collaborating with other providers to find out what is the impact of apprenticeships. So what's happening to people when they join the programme? Is it helping their careers? And some of that is related to protected characteristics. The last point, I'm so sorry for running over time. These are our funders. So I'm part of, obviously, the Ignite network. We got a little bit of money from QAA to start the project quite a long time ago. I'm also a fellow in the EDI Plus network, which was funded at the same time as the Ignite network. And I've also advertised in Michele Romano because most of this work that I've presented is his. He had to do the focus groups, and because obviously I'm the programme lead, it's a bit inappropriate for me to do that work. He has been brilliant. He has nearly finished his Masters in Politics and Psychology, and he's open to work, and he doesn't know I'm putting him on the slides like that. So, yeah, I'll send him the slides later. He'll be delighted. So, thank you very much.
Can we have both of you?
Yes, of course. You get a copy of those slides. They're brilliant.
Just want to change it over to this slide.
Can I use chair's privilege again to ask the first question? If you think of your projects as the basis for evidence-based policy making within your institutions, how likely do you think that neuro-inclusion and working class inclusion will be fostered through policy within your institutions?
I would say, is this on? Yes. I would say that the will is there. The likelihood of it making an impact is, I don't know. We're trying. There are things that people want to do, but trying to get those policies in place is quite tricky. But there is definitely a will at very senior levels within my institution to solve some of these problems and make real impactful change. It's just how do we spread that as across the university or across the sector as a kind of embedded thing within the culture. So I don't know how likely it is, but I'm hoping.
We have a Pro-VC for social mobility. Mm-hmm. For example, having that kind of push could be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hello. In terms of neuro-inclusion, talking about my institution, I think and industry, it all depends on the line manager. So there are, in theory, policies in place, not on neurodiversity, but everything depends on the manager because, as you mentioned about, field boards and all the rest, we tend to give reasonable adjustments, etc., extensions to students. We tend to accommodate even like emergency kind of field boards, but we don't acknowledge staff who might be struggling with deadlines. So like, why don't we give extensions to staff to do the marking, and we have to do it within 20 working days, for example? So there's no compassion for staff, you know. So these things can be easily done, but they're not even thought of.
So there's need for culture change. We have a question, follow-on question. How can the PGR supervisors who are not neurodivergent practice empathy and support for PGRs with Andy?
Good luck. So I think there needs to be a proper training first. I am a PhD supervisor. We've been given some training, but if honest, I don't think it's changed in any significant way my way of supervising. I continue supervising as I'm doing research, you know, like I'm trying to listen to, etc. I don't have anything in common with my supervisee. I really get stressed. I try to be empathetic, but still I struggle, you know what I mean? But I don't have the necessary support from the university to accommodate her different ways of working. I mean, I've ended up doing, you know, like plans of how she needs to structure everything. But this again, you know, like it's because I'm familiar with EDI issues, etc., that I'm trying to do that. I'm sure that colleagues are very busy to go into that extent and write them the structure of their theoretical framework. You know?
Thank you so much.
That's it. So proper training.
Yes, thank you very much. More questions? Yes, please.
Question for both of you, I'm afraid. Vanda, there was a thing I was told a long time ago. If you enjoy working with people and people interest you, you've got no business working in HR. It's a, you know, it's a sort of it's a very different discipline. And I am absolutely sure that most academics are not sociopaths. I accept that some might be, but it can't be most. You have to go to industry for that to really happen. One of the big contrasts I've seen in working with Becky and the department at Strathclyde is, in our business, management and leadership are professional disciplines, particularly management, and the relationship, the employer-employee relationship, is a very carefully controlled one that addresses the topics that you were raising. I contrast that with academia, where people who are, you know, have professional research interests, who are also running teaching, who are also trying to attract funding, get gifted, I don't know if that's the word, this responsibility for, you know, for PhD students, for PDRs, and indeed some students, and have to cope with the professional managerial aspects of that. Why isn't management seen as a professional discipline within academia? Are you asking me? Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the obvious answer to the question.
I don't know, ask our VC, you know, like that. I am leading the Athena Swan application for the business school, and we're doing okay in terms of climate and culture, etc. The big issue is the workload, and everybody mentions exactly this, that our admin work, our management work is not acknowledged in any way. It's just something that is required, and we're not even given appropriate training for that. And if you ask about me, my admin skills are catastrophic. Like every single time I send an email, then I have to send 3 more to amend what I've done. So, you know, but nobody showed me properly what I needed.
Go on then.
Well, I would say that part of the problem is in academia, you create your own job. So you find your own opportunities and you do your own thing. And then if you look at how do I get paid more money for this, there are promotion criteria, and some of that will be managing people. So then you get given the responsibility to manage people so you can be promoted, and it becomes just a thing you do to progress rather than something the university really focuses on, if that makes sense. So from my side, it's you just end up doing these things naturally.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
Two more
Just say how
questions.
it emerged.
Two more comments or questions, but if you could keep your questions or comments to 1 minute each.
Super brief. I was just going to answer. So I think it emerged from the fact that it's a historic thing, that that in terms of how management is viewed in universities, it used to be a purely administrative and non-strategic role. So it rotated round and it was purely admin, and you just had to do it for a bit as head of department. And universities were not expected to run as a business, bring their own income in and act as strategic things. They were a source of education and you did your own research in your spare time. That is nothing like what they're like now. And the management structure has not changed, basically. So suddenly you land into a strategic management role with absolutely no background in strategy, or even usually any idea where the university, how it manages its finances, where its data is, what its KPIs are at a management level. You just walk into an office and suddenly become the head of department. So, well, that's what happened to me anyway. so with no handover. So it's historic, and it's because they're such old institutions, and it's simply how the old system worked, and nobody has ever redone it.
Thank you so much, Becky.
So I suppose from my experience, having been 15 years in both, so
Yes.
so when I worked in the construction industry, we've systems ISO in place. I would have been trained how to write a letter. So my boss would have sat me in the office when I was a site engineer doing my surveying. I was trained how to change the drawings, how to do the titles on things. Everything had a structure and a process. And since I've moved to academia, this has been the biggest struggle for me, people keeping email records. There is no processes. There are no functions that actually function correctly. It really depends on the individual that you're dealing with at that particular moment in time. And what happens is if you're dealing with one good person, that person will get pigeonholed doing that job in the university, or alternatively, everybody will go to them all the time to do that job, and they'll become overwhelmed as a clerical staff or administrator. If you're a bright academic and you want to get ahead, you will do your admin job badly to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and that's actually a very, very sad thing. And it's costing the universities sector millions of pounds annually. And we have instances, it's like a Titanic ship with all the windows open, waiting for a wave to come in, and the ship will go left or right. Data, the cybersecurity breaches, how different universities handle them was actually really amazing, and some craziness. They're the sort of things that happen. But what we need to do, if we're going to improve it, is we actually need to put proper systems and procedures in place. And we talk about professional bodies. Our own institutions need to have some sort of accreditation process. And it's not just really about, having your engineering council accreditation for your degree. It's actually about professional services and how we manage ourselves, because actually that's creating a lot of the stress. So people don't know the boundaries of what they can and can't do. And that's not actually how BAM would operate. You could open a folder, there's a project there, and I'm sure if I said to Alistair, could he open the bridge from the N7 on the outside Cork, which is my city, could you dig out all the files? They will be all there and perfect, because if there's going to be a litigious case, they have to have all those records.
Thank you so much. I have to stop. Thank you. We are moving on to the next session now, which will be poster sessions. Thank you so much to our presenters again. There is a question, anonymous question, but I would like to take this question because it's a bit contentious at the end of the sessions, if it's possible, because it's not concerning this aspect. So where will we have it here?
It's not
it's online.
It's presentation,
Yes.
Chair.
There will be 2 online presentations, but in total there are 5. But they will be very brief, hopefully. Looking at our previous speakers, I think we will run over time. We are the thing between academic learning and your lunch. So
These are in the wrong order. Right, wait a minute. So we'll go with Fabio first. I think.
Fabio? Yes.
I save time. Hello everyone, my name is Fabio Fasoli and I'm gonna talk about this project I'm doing with Marco. So we have a very long title, but the project is about enhancing inclusion for LGBTQI+ researcher in STEM and energy research. So we have three main aims. I'm going to talk about each of them now, but basically they're all meant to give a bit of information around inclusion and hopefully lead to some solutions. So the first objective is to aim to map and review the best practices that already exist in higher education when it comes to LGBTQI+ people in reference to inclusion, retention, and promotion. So the first task that we have been doing is basically mapping what is available on websites of different universities. So we have looked at 140 universities across the UK, just to see what kind of content is there, whether there is a mention of LGBTQI+ researchers. For example, if there is LGBT network and there is a person that can be contacted and so on and so forth. And also like there is any mention about specific practices on the websites. That is going to be paired with a survey that we're going to send out to all universities, trying to get a bit more sense of what are practices that might not be mentioned on the websites, but actually are implemented and used across different institutions. And we're also going to do some interviews with EDI experts, because we know that when we have practices, there is also a journey to implement those practices, and we want to understand whether there were some challenges and how people have overcome those challenges to implement the practices. So that will be the starting point for one of our output, is a digital toolkit on good practices in the sector. The second aim is to bring in the perspective of LGBTQI+ researchers on these topics. So we know already quite a bit on experiences of barriers and that people have, but we want to understand what is the perception of LGBTQI+ people on the practices that different institutions are implementing, to understand whether they're perceived as effective or not, and if they're not effective, what can be done to improve them. I forgot to mention that in the interviews we plan to run in the first objective, or the first part of the project, we want to understand what are the areas of improvements that EDI practitioners think are needed in relation to different practices. So we're going to investigate this by running a focus groups that hopefully will lead us to have a conceptual framework on perception of those practices when it comes from LGBTQI+ individuals. And the final one is the co-creation of solutions. So we will bring into the discussion some of the practices that we have found in the first phase of the project, then that we have discussed with the LGBTQI people, and we're going to share with LGBTQI people and EDI practitioners those practices and see whether we can improve them, and what together we can understand has an improvement, because that can vary. So we're going to run a workshop, and that will lead to a policy brief with some actionable recommendations that hopefully are going to be used by different institutions to improve the practices that are in place, or maybe use new practices that are not in place. And I've been very quick.
Okay, so we skipped over Litka, so we're going to have Dr. Litka Milian from Durham now. Just a minute, she's a remote presenter. So.
Can you see it? Yes. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So hello everyone, and first of all, we would like to thank you.
Would you please quickly press the slideshow button?
Oh, sorry.
That one. Yeah.
Oh, I did.
Thank you.
Sorry. We would like to say thank you to Ignite for support of our project and giving us a chance to speak today and share our plans with you. So my name is Litka Milian. I'm from Durham University, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Dominika Zabiegaj from Northumbria University. We are both EDI Plus fellows, and we are leading this project, Bridging the Gap, collaborative solutions to racial equity in chemical and engineering sciences. We are very excited to tell you about our upcoming work, and in this presentation we'll outline our aims of the project, why this project is important, what we plan to do, and the impact we hope to make. So now I will hand over to Dominika, who will explain what the project is about.
Thank you so much, Litka. So we want to dig into challenges faced by BAME students in chemical and engineering sciences. As you can see on the map, despite of being located in the northeast of England, Durham and Northumbria have contrasting characteristics. One serves predominantly home students, the other one has more international student body. Both universities are placed in regions significantly affected by industrial decline, leading to socioeconomic challenges that amplify racial inequities and their intersection with the social class. These factors adversely impact students' engagement, academic success, employability, all in chemical and engineering sciences. Next slide, please.
Right, thank you very much. So just a little bit why this project. So as you're probably aware, many Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds in STEM, they face all sorts of challenges, and this can include discrimination, fewer resources, fewer career opportunities, especially in the areas that where the economic is a struggle. And because of this, there is a real need for support that matches the specific situation the students are facing, so they can fully take part and succeed in the studies, and later on have better job opportunities, prospects. So by working with these two different universities, we hope to find solutions that will work well for a wide range of students, and then we can share it with widely across the whole sector. Now I will hand over again to Dominika, who will explain what we're planning to do.
Thank you, Litka. We want to run focus groups and interview BAME students in chemistry and engineering. We are hoping to compare those experiences between both of the universities and to understand actually better how gender, the background, and the ethnicity intersect. We are hoping to develop not only targeted support, but we are hoping to use mentorship scheme and curriculum changes to organize workshops and build sense of belonging and challenge the stereotypes. And we are aiming to disseminate our findings with wider audience through reports, presentations, and hopefully some publications. Over to you, Litka.
Thank you. So yes, as Dominika mentioned, we want to help make STEM more inclusive by sharing our findings with teachers, with staff, and we hope that the underrepresented students have fairer access to resources and opportunities, so everyone has a better chance to succeed in their studies. And we hope that our work will support the diverse students in the studies and the future careers in both chemical and engineering sciences. And just repeating after what Dominika has said, we will share our findings widely within our universities across the UK, and more widely by sharing our reports and hopefully publications. So that's all from us. Do you have any questions?
Both of you. Now we will have Mennan, Guder. Yes, please.
Welcome everyone. workforce diversity, digital applications, acceptance in energy sector. The topic is, okay, I'm Mennan, Guder. We are all from Cranfield University. It's a combination of computer scientists, social scientists. So let's start. In terms of the what we are doing, what we are trying to do through the project, actually, let's do the problem statement. Minor technical communities face some barriers in accessing and trusting the digital energy services due to the lack of representation, maybe cultural mismatches. It may go beyond the design, initial requirement analysis, or any kind of actually point. And in this project, we are trying to identify the extent of these issues in the development of digital tools and services. And then that doesn't mean, now we are focusing on the development of the digital tools, but energy sector actually really embed into the research industry. So we develop, for example, in our research group, we develop some projects together at the same time. So it's an embedded dimension in terms of the industry and the research. And in terms of the objectives, we'll try to map the demographics and backgrounds of the energy developers or service developers or any kind of services actually in the energy sector. And we will run focus groups to evaluate the energy applications. There will be focus groups for mainly examining the specified selected applications. So another objective is that one. And at the end, we'll try to compare the team perception versus the user perception actually. And what is the point actually, what is the ideas coming from? Me and Pega and Professor Nazmi actually, we were part of the PRIME project. Maybe some of you may heard. The project mainly builds upon our project is mainly builds upon PRIME project, which is protecting minor technical communities online. The project was focusing on the understanding how ME communities engage with the digital services actually in energy, health, and housing sectors. Now we are focusing on turning the focus on to energy sector, and what we try to expand in terms of beyond the PRIME actually. We in that project we'll focus on how workforce characteristics influence the digital tool development. In the PRIME we didn't deal with any workforce dimension, and we'll test the design principles which is actually determined throughout the focus groups workshops in the PRIME, and those dimensions were fairness, compassion, user-centered design, accessibility, transparency, privacy, security, and trustworthiness. In upcoming slides, I have a reference to the code of practice actually. In the code of practice, you can find a detailed description about each of those and how they are evaluated and how they are actually created. And in the PRIME, we mainly work with minor technical communities from Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Birmingham, and London. In that particular project, we will focus on the Luton area. We will work with the Luton Council actually in order to handle the focus groups specifically. And what's the project focus? Let's go over the work packages a little bit. Examining how workforce diversity in the energy sector affects the acceptance of the digital applications among the minor technical communities actually. This is the scope. And in terms of, we have three actually work packages. The first one is about the survey. We'll conduct a survey about to get the demographics and perception in the energy sector. In the second work package, conducting some focus groups for the energy apps evaluations. These are the currently selected, and we are working on those for energy applications. But we select that one because we have a project with the Nissan, and we already conduct some research on that one. Beyond this project, actually, we focus on other usability issues. But so that we are considering selecting those, but we have some other ideas about maybe selecting easier, less EV-dependent applications may lead to a better focus group participation. So yeah, we have some, working on that one. And the work package 3 is actually, the idea is developing a model linking workforce diversity to acceptance. So, and how we'll be doing that one? We will have some survey on one hand. We will have some focus groups present data on other hand. Basically, we'll try to digitize the focus group findings in one way. Opinion mining may be one of those possible models that we can employ. So, but the idea is linking those two and getting some insights out as an output. In Prime, we develop some policy briefs in that case, we aim a similar, maybe a simpler version of in order to improve the usability of digital tools and among ME communities, and enhancing the trust in energy services among the minority technical communities through determining the points actually may lead some outputs. And let's go. And in the focus group design, it's still under development. These are the 4 possible apps we are considering. As I mentioned, we'll use the guiding framework from the Prime Minor Technical Code of Practice document, so that we'll ask the questions in the focus group based on those principles. In terms of the participants, as I mentioned, we will work with minor technical users from Luton. And the final step will be the survey actually, or it will be parallel, but throughout the survey, we'll try to collect demographics, industry information, personal background, and some other dimensions of the workforce diversity actually. And I sent a detailed version to for the survey. I appreciate if you distribute that one, especially whoever from the energy sector will be. Really appreciate for my side. Thank you for listening.
Now we have Josh Lait. Are you here? Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so that. Hi, my name's Josh Lait. So I'm speaking here on behalf of our team. I'll introduce the next slide. So I'm from the Science Policy Research Unit, the University of Sussex. I'm also part of the Energy Demand Research Centre. So our project kind of formed originally out of some conversations based on my PhD research, which is taking education policies and imagining them as a form of energy policy and seeing how they impact the energy system. So my PhD research looked at impacts on energy demand and supply, and this project looks at development of or access to green skills career pathways. So this I should introduce the team first. So we've got Irina, Sylvia, who are from UCL and University of Exeter, Helena and Liz Dunn. So it's kind of an interesting team that brings together those working in this kind of exclusion education space, so sociology of education, with Irina, who works in engineering and public policy, and Sylvia, who's looking at this communications representation aspect within climate research. So the purpose of the research is to think about how education policy over the last 20 years, by design, tends to exclude certain people from the possibility of even entering energy career pathways quite early on. And by this, we mean looking at providing alternative provision. So a lot of people with disabilities are put quite early into alternative provision. And the main policy change of the last 20 years was to effectively move these sites off of mainstream sites and put them into these small special schools out of sight, out of mind, where they were not required to teach the full curriculum. And so by very definition there, it kind of creates this kind of disabling ability to access these pathways. Cool. So the project, our objectives, looking at sort of policy barriers. So we're doing kind of an education policy review, and we're thinking about what are the particular policies, both at kind of the national level, but also with a lot of SEND education hours provided by multi-academy trusts who are publicly funded but privately run. They create their own policies, and likewise looking at the local authorities as well. So seeing how do their policies around which pupils are allocated where and on what basis kind of impact who gets to access what. Then the learning experiences, though, so for students and staff and people running these sites, what are the experiences there of STEM learning? Now, the other side of this is around visual representation. So a lot of STEM learning interventions are by definition targeted at mainstream education. When we did our initial sort of scoping review while putting the project together, we noticed that there was very little targeted around alternative provision, and even for mainstream sites, there was often not a huge consideration of kind of disabled pupils within that. And there's two parts. There's practical, so you're practically thinking about what is important for disabled pupils, but also this kind of, by not being represented, is kind of this discursive impact of you're not being seen as part of it, kind of mentally limits what you conceive of as possible if you're not being included within these interventions to try and promote STEM learning. Yeah, so I've talked about this a bit already, but we have a kind of doing kind of document analysis, but also sort of interviews, and this would be both with sort of alternative provision providers, but then also with those working to sort of try and promote STEM education and learning, particularly within secondary education. So expected outcome, so we're going to write a peer-reviewed article which is going to be looking at this kind of relationships between policies of exclusion as kind of mechanisms and and then effectively access to career pathways and kind of what that means for just transitions. There's a lot of kind of focus recently around green skills, and that's becoming quite a big thing within the academic literature, but not around this question of access and disability. Likewise, a policy briefing, which we aimed very much at those working within this space and sort of providing how can we actually start to address these kind of issues of exclusion. And then for the organisations that are sort of working to try and promote STEM, and this might not, and they might not be coming from EDI background, how can they have sort of better inclusion within their activities? Brilliant. And so just kind of where we're at, so we have recruited an RA, we're kind of currently doing our sort of policy literature review, and we're organising an advisory panel because we think that it's quite important to have co-production and be working with disabled people during this project. Brilliant, thank you.
Our last presentation is online. Karishma, Joshi, are they online?
Yes, can you hear me?
Unfortunately, at the end of the session, Karishma, thank you, we can hear you. We will not have questions, but if you have questions, please find the person during lunch. I have my marching orders to lunch, so Karishma, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I realise I'm in a very dangerous position here between you and lunch, so I'll be as quick as possible. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but I just wanted to thank Ignite Plus and Claire for accepting our poster and allowing me to share our work today. So this poster highlights how CDICE anticipated delegate needs to ensure inclusive practices at the MPDC 23, which is the National Postdoc Conference that's held every year during National Postdoc Appreciation Week, which is normally in September. And in 2023, we hosted it at Loughborough University in... sorry, is there a message? Can't see the screen. Is everybody able to see the poster, Claire? Okay, I'm going to carry on. So we hosted this at Loughborough University in person, and from the moment that that we won the bid to be able to host this, first thing we did was set up a diverse steering group and engage with wider networks to help plan inclusivity. They helped us proactively put interventions in place for an enjoyable and welcome experience for all. It also helped ensure that we delivered a diverse programme. And the steering group was also a mechanism for checking we were keeping to our principles right from planning to delivery. Next slide, please. So the first thing that was highlighted was the need for a British Sign Language interpreter. Luckily, this was highlighted well in advance because they have very long lead times for the availability. So we were able to book this from 6 months in advance. And we ensured that the interpreter was in the main plenary room for all the sessions. Next slide, please. So the second thing that we did was we developed and embedded an accessibility key on the conference programme. This gave delegates an at-a-glance view of how interactive each session will be, so it helped them plan the day around their individual needs and preferences, because we did have quite a few parallel sessions going on in the morning and the afternoon. And then the third thing that we did was we identified that when people go to conferences and things, sometimes it can get overwhelming, especially if it's going on for so long. So we created a wellbeing space, which was still near the conference area, but it was sort of put out of the way, so it could be a nice quiet space for the delegates to wind down and just recharge the speakers as well. And we arranged a few calming activities which they could participate in. I did go in a few times and play a very subtle game of double. If anybody knows the game, you know how brilliant it is. So overall, we did receive overwhelmingly positive feedback on how regarding the atmosphere of the day, which we were really pleased about. And you can see some of the quotes in the speech bubbles on the poster there. And now moving forward, we embedded these practices in all of our CDICE events. And we were also pleased to see that the National ECR Net Zero Conference in 2024 embedded the accessibility key to highlight interactivity levels on their programme. Next slide, please. There's a QR code there which links to the blog, which has all the interventions that we put in place for that conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karishma. I'm sorry that you are not here to enjoy the lunch. We have plenty of lunch. Don't be shy in eating. And also, please find people you don't know and use this as an opportunity to network. And if you have questions to our poster presenters in particular, please go and find them and disturb them during lunch. Don't be shy.
Can I just say I'm available online if anybody wants to send me an email with any questions as well. I'm happy to put my email address in the chat if you wanted to share it.
Yes, you heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.